Today it is his birthday, although strangely on Wikipedia it says at first that he was born on the 23rd of June, and then in the same text a little bit lower it says born on June 13th. I have my own sources of information. It seems that indeed he was born today. But anyway, even if he was born on the 23rd, we talk about him today. He's a contemporary architect. I think he's 77 years old now, and he was trained at Princeton. He's from Argentina, but he did well for himself in the United States. He was also the curator of architecture and design at the Museum of Modern Art in New York for a number of years. And his work was publicized quite often. And he built some buildings. But in the past few years, I didn't see too much done by him in architecture, at least. I like this expression that comes from him. And I really think we should think seriously about what he means by these three words: green over gray. In a way, this translates into nature over man, because man is somehow associated with his gray actions, and green indeed means nature. So Emilio Ambasz, born June 13th in Argentina, is an Argentinian US architect and award-winning industrial designer. From 1969 to 1976, he was a curator of design at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Ambasz was a precursor of green, so-called green architecture. Ambasz's trademark style is a combination of buildings and gardens, which he describes as green over gray. He bucked the trends of the 1970s, hiding his buildings under grass or putting them on boats. The Emilio Ambasz Award for Green Architecture is awarded every year by the Architecture Israel quarterly magazine. This is the man, and I think he's a man quite capable of negotiating with society, sometimes even in difficult circumstances, that is the commercial ones, but what appears to be an advantage could also become a disadvantage, and this is what made me stop at one point the presentation, because I got tired of a certain kind of architecture and also of a certain kind of so-called industrial design. His success is probably in good measure reflecting his chameleon ability to negotiate with society and life. And his face seems to say it. Drawings, some drawings by Emilio Ambasz. His drawings are very, in a way, personal. They are poetical, they are conceptual. In a way, they are green themselves. They seem to be simple, and at times they are actually maybe almost simplistic, but they also have a certain level of purity and conceptual or poetical, and I think that purity is to be contemplated. Well, at that time he drew, of course, manually on tracing paper, or it was at that time in the 70s there was no yet digital technology, but if we look at these four drawings, what do we see? We see a conceptual architecture which, as I said, doesn't banish what is called architectural poetry, and it's done with very simple means. You see no numbers. Do you see numbers here? Do you see dimensions? No, it's just the purity of the drawing. And I think, such drawings are necessary, because they purify the air, so to speak. They you know, they create images that are easily recognizable, and um, uh, they become explicit of the thought of the architect without unnecessary, you know, additions. The problem, though, is that you know, architecture is more complex, and the drawing might be nice, you know, but the reality of the building may be less so. These drawings, as you can see, they were framed and exhibited in museums and so on. So you know, they were valued as drawings. I personally think that in the teaching of architecture, such drawings are very useful. On one hand, they are about the beauty of architecture. On the other hand, they are about expressing concisely what is called a concept. And I don't think such drawings should be, you know, dismissed because they are not so called realistic, or no. I mean, even the drawings of Palladio in the 4 books of architecture, they are idealized drawings. I mean, you know, important drawings in the history of architecture represent architecture in its essence, not in its not necessarily in its you know, literal truth. We are going to see this house. He built it in Spain, and anyway, we'll talk about it. It also has nice drawings, maybe a little bit too nice in a way, but I'll reserve the right to say more about this when we arrive at this particular building. But we already see in this section that the actual house, actual house is underneath the level of the earth. And that big wall there is essentially, you know, a rhetorical architectural figure. But the actual building is situated under the level of the earth, under ground zero. This is the plan, actually, of this house, which he built in Spain. What do we see here? We see on one hand geometry in the lower right corner, but we also see lyrical flowing lines which represent walls in general, but not only walls. And you would say, you know, some of these things are rather capricious formally, but I kept saying that capriciousness is part of architecture as well. Not everything can be described, I would say, rationally. I mean, very well, one would say, why is this curve this way and not the other way? Or, you know, that's how the architect did it. You know, it's like, you know, asking God why did make one with a nose that is with 1 centimeter longer than the noses of other people. You know, well, that's how things are. Now his architecture is interesting, and potentially even more interesting than he himself probably realized or was able to implement. Architecture is also about sensuality, is about joy. Joy in the making and joy in the building. If you don't have this joy, and joy is usually derives from a lot from, you know, is connected with the pleasure principle, with capriciousness, with playing. You find pleasure in doing something, and you know, that's where joy comes from. if you only try to think rationally and as a functionalist, you are not going easily to arrive at that joy, without which creativity is not really possible. And you know, the paradox is that actually in the long run, in the long term, the non-functionalists earn more commissions than the functionalists. Because most people who have some money want to build something, they also want to have some pleasure looking at their building that they pay for. They want to have some joy. And if you only provide to them, you know, calculations and, you know, rational arguments about this or that, I don't think they will have a lot of pleasure. They might have, you know, some reasons to think that, yes, it's a correct building, but where is the pleasure? Where is the joy? Where is that necessary sensuality? Now, this is a bank in Mestre in Venice from 2009. He built it. And his architecture is not actually a very complicated one. If you see some of his works, and you can go to his website, Emilio Ambasz, and you'll see some other works which I didn't include in this presentation, because I didn't feel that they were adding anything really beyond or besides what I'm going to show. Here again, he is climbing with the green over the gray, over the building, and part of the building is sunken under the level of the earth. And then he has these dramatic sloping, you know, slanted surfaces which add some drama. And here it is. You know, it's a bank that is privileged to sit in a natural environment in a large open space. But the architecture, I wouldn't say it's extremely complex, and I would say intrinsically it is not quite green. In my opinion, a green architecture is an architecture which is not commercial. I would even go so far in saying this. Now, of course, a bank through its function is commercial, is about money. How do you make a green bank? Maybe it's a contradiction in terms. Maybe a bank could never be truly called green, although, you know, the dollars are called greens, you know. It's a paradox, kind of. I'm referring to the other greenness of living without the mechanisms of profit making. In my opinion, profit making is not green. Green, in my opinion, is about something. An equilibrium, a balanced way of living under the sky, perhaps never truly achievable. You know, it's about trust even. To be green, to live in a green way is about having trust, having no trust between human beings and in human negotiations, human actions, to have no need for a profit. Profit in itself, in my opinion, is colored symbolically in red, because it's about conflict, about taking advantage, is about unfairness. In my opinion, a green architecture is a fair architecture. Everything that is or could be or should be green is to be, I think, fair. And capitalism is not a fair society at all. The very fact that some are extremely rich and many are much less so, not to say downright poor, this is certainly not a green socio-economical political system. Capitalism is not green in its essence. It's not green. And, you know, because it's based on abuse, on consumption and production beyond necessities. But this bank, you know, you look at it, it could have been a temple, some kind of a modern, you know, sacred temple. If you neglect the other side, the one that we just saw here, you know, here. I mean, here, this building is clearly not a temple. But seen from here, it could have been, you know, because you don't see windows, you don't see large surfaces of glass. It could have been you know, anything, a memorial or anything, but a bank probably. And maybe this is what the people of Venice liked, that it's a bank that doesn't look like a bank, at least seen from here. The plan is so-called pure, but if we look at it critically, what does this triangle say? Well, you have this narrow entrance from here, and the building opens quite rhetorically towards the horizon, towards the sky, and so on. But wait a minute, this is a bank. It's about making money. It's about money. So what we see here, and maybe a psychoanalyst, not very, you know, with a lot of training or extremely, you know, intuitive, would say this is a building that somehow you enter from the opposite side of its main facade. And if I reflect on that beautiful poem in prose by Charles Baudelaire, where an interviewer, someone asked the poet, do you love gold, meaning money? And he says, I hate it in as much as you hate God. Well, you would say you enter from God's side, the opposite side of the large windows, which represent the main facade of the building. Otherwise, these two walls are opaque. So you move towards, I mean, maybe I fantasize now, but I could read this plan as coming from, well, this is the highway, and the car is connected with the highway, and you arrive here with a car, but you enter in this space from the back in a way, and you enter from the side of anti-money in a way and move towards money. And so the building has its largest openness on the other side. And I would say that this facade with the windows is the one that expresses to an extent that it's an office. It's an office building with, you know, the typical functions of an office building. In actuality, there are some functions here too, but he hides them behind these rhetorical, opaque walls. I don't think the building is very sincere. You know, I think the building has a certain level of drama, but you wonder, you know, is it truly telling the truth about the function of the building? Perhaps not. And I feel tempted to think that I didn't visit this building, but I feel tempted to think that if I work here, I would get this feeling that this longest facade, the largest facade, the one with a lot of windows, is actually, you know, opening up to the sky and to the landscape in a little bit in a questionable way, because it's not the role of a bank to extend the arms, so to speak, in embracing the cosmos, when in fact it's a building destined to counting money. This is what a bank does. Yes, it looks interesting from here, no? And you would say, sure, again, nature has the upper hand. Green is over gray, but from underneath, you know, the true green of our time, that is money, is moving the world, and not so much this thin layer of grass on top of the building. Now, a private estate in Montana, USA, I don't think, I'm a little bit confused, because some of his works are the renderings of these works are so close to what we might call reality that I don't know. Is the building built? Is it just rendering? I'm a little bit confused. This seems to be, I don't know, maybe some of you who know better certain softwares and are you know, more knowledgeable about digital renderings would realize immediately if this was built or is just a rendering. Now, this is obviously a rendering. It's a model. It's a model, but some of the images to me are a little bit confusing. This is actually not a correct representation of, um, of this world. For example, is curved in the views that we saw and we are going to see. But nevertheless, this image of this fragment of the model is provocative, is provoking, because there is almost no house. The body of the house is underneath this hill. And then we see horses and we see the sculpture, and I don't know if this is a lake or not. But all in all, it's not the typical house that we expect, whatever its form. And there actually, or there were to be two buildings here, not just one. For example, this one is different from what we just saw. And he uses this, in my opinion, he's not a great architect. I hope he doesn't hear me now, and he doesn't, he won't. He's playing, I would say, rather fast, in a facile way. He uses these, you know, these elements here, as he uses them in other projects in various forms, like with a glass surface. Or I think the rhetorical aspects of his architecture are very obvious. I know architecture has to do with representation as well, meaning with rhetorics, I know that. But it depends to what extent you push the rhetorics of the building. But there are interesting ideas here, even if he didn't build the buildings, and even if there are problems, the idea to diminish the impact of the building on the landscape, I think, is a good one. Well, here it seems the building was built. I don't know. Is this a rendering too? It could be a rendering, but it could also be the so-called real building. Well, I like the fact that there are these, I don't know what they are, these huge stone, you know, walls, remnants maybe of something in the past. There is a level of artificiality here that is questionable, but there are still some interesting aspects. You can see that Emilio Ambasz was affected by postmodernism, like this part here, which is golden, and we'll see it in detail. Plus, we see here this lumber, these huge wooden pieces culminate with you know, some kind of bronze or golden metallic parts that connect it with this wall. You know, it's theatrical. It's in a way stage design. As for this facade, during the night, it becomes almost, you know, too obviously, you know, conveniently expressed villa, you know, with this arch here and this cornice, which is very bourgeois and even more than bourgeois, you know, golden. It's possible it was not built. I mean, these pieces of furniture here, they seem to be, you know, included digitally, not. Anyway, actually, you know, the cynic in me would say, if we can render buildings so well to that they appear to be built, wouldn't it be actually nice to just render them as if they were built and not build them? I know I would be told, wait a minute, I need my building. I need badly my building. But I wonder, do we really need badly all these buildings that we build? But I know the architect cannot stand still. The architect is going through, long years of study in order to build and build and build. But the earth can only take so much building. The Chinese are very busy erasing mountains overnight in order to build and build again. And they are not the only ones. The whole world has an immense appetite for building and building again. Imagine if we continue in this rhythm in 100 years, we cover the whole earth with cement and asphalt and concrete and steel and glass and wood and so on. And we invent all kinds of tricks in a way to lie to ourselves that we become green, because now, as you know, there are attempts to build even skyscrapers, maybe not the tallest, in wood. We think that if we build in wood, we build sustainably, but that wood means a cut down forest or cut down trees. And strangely, we think that even Aravena, who seems to be so concerned with ecology and sustainability, he did a piece now this year at the Venice Biennial, which is highly anti-sustainability and anti-ecology. He brought from Chile huge pieces of lumber, trunks of very tall trees, and built some kind of a monument there. It's in Venice now. I mean, can you imagine the expenditure just to bring all that wood from Chile to Venice? Not to speak about, cutting down those trees, tens, if not hundreds of trees. Sad. But you see here, this canopy, this cornice is the postmodern melodrama, and then you see here even the mechanism of control, the security device. I think this is a rendering. It's not the real thing. Anyway, but again, some interesting ideas are here. To minimize the presence of the building towards the exterior, to go with some parts of the building underground or inserted into the ground. Something can be explored following his proposals. Now the Cordoba house, and I so regret that he has a text about this building on his website. Unfortunately, I meant to include it in the presentation, and I forgot to do it, and I apologize. But we look at the building. Initially, because it's something mentioned with spiritual retreat, I thought was some kind of a chapel, but it's actually a house. And we already saw some drawings of it. And yes, it's unusual. You wouldn't call this a house, would you? Because the actual house is underground. But the most interesting part, and the one that is visible, is this one, which is rhetorically potent, but it's essentially a declamation. Is a rhetorical device. It's a misleading, in a way, architecture, and it's not modest. As such, it is not green at all, because again, green is not only a color. To act in a green way is to build modestly, and this is not modest at all. I mean, look at the height of the tree and look at the height of this thing, and there are just two walls that support this, I don't know, large bow window or whatever it is. I personally, I think the demagogy of this part of the building is very obvious. Yes, it looks nice here, yes, but you would say some kind of monument to resistance fighters or something, or a meditation chapel or whatever. You know, what does this constructive effort represent? Now, he didn't paint this in green, it's true, but he's a man who wrote green over gray. Well, here we obviously have gray, or rather white, over green. Is it obvious? But as an Italian critic told me, Luigi Prestinenza, he said, Dan, never trust what architects say. They say one thing and they build another thing. And this I noticed in many cases. It is interesting, you know, with this, but what does it mean? You know, you go there at the top, and yes, this is a digital image. Of course, it's not built like this. You know, you can't walk on this stair without a handrail or something. It's an idea. That's it. And not to speak about the abruptness of the stair. Obviously, Emilio Ambasz didn't learn at Princeton about certain things, but although in this project he seems rather like a, you know, quasi-rebellious student, he built some large buildings, especially in Japan, and we are going to see them. But personally, I think this project is questionable. While it is nice in plan, it's nice in drawings, the very idea is to me very. I think it says something about him that green over gray is maybe a mask, a shield behind which he hides different interests. And those different interests are illustrated clearly with this mega, you know, dual walls, or how to call it, this mega construction on top of the hill while the house is sunken. Again, this to me is not a green gesture at all. It's overwhelming to the landscape, is too obvious. It's, I would say, arrogant towards the other people and towards the hills and towards everything. If it was a monument of some sort or a chapel, I would have accepted it more. But for a single family habitation, I find it, you know, not very much green over gray at all. Now, this complex of buildings he built in Texas, the Lucille Halsell Conservatory in San Antonio, Texas. I will read a little bit about it. Lucille Halsell Conservatory is a complex of greenhouses. Please notice the word greenhouses, located in the hot, dry climate of southern Texas. Unlike northern climates, where traditionally glazed greenhouses maximize sunlight, the climate of San Antonio requires that plants be shielded from the sun. Emilio Ambasz's design uses the earth as a container and protector of the plants, controlling light and heat levels by limiting glazed areas to the roof. This innovative design concept significantly decreased the need for expensive mechanical systems, thereby reducing the overall cost of the building by over 20%. Now, I have to confess, I read this, but when I look at the building, I see something very different. I see a lot of glass, so I don't understand. I regret that Mahadev Raman, our friend, who is an excellent mechanical engineer, is not here, because he would have told us if indeed we could talk here about an overall cost of the building being reduced by 20%. Look at this. Is this not glass? Am I blind? Do I not see correctly? I mean, this is a glass architecture which claims that it tried to reduce the surface of the glass used. And I just see something else. I mean, it's only glass that I see. Strange. I mean, yes, the volumes are interesting. Yes, we saw the pyramid of glass by IMP in front of the Louvre. But where is that? In my opinion, this is a very expensive complex of buildings, exactly because, you know, you have a lot of glass. It's true, it's a conservatory. So I guess for a conservatory, you need, if indeed you need a conservatory, I mean, what is a conservatory? It's a place where we entrap plants, no? That's what we do. It's some kind of a zoo for plants. This is what a conservatory is. This is what a so-called greenhouse is, which is not green at all in its essence, because why are we entrapping plants? In the so-called concentration camps destined for plants. I mean, that's what they are. Yes, you see, this is the model. It looks very innocent. It's only green, and there is a blue lake there, the little temple here. But when we look at the built works, we see something else. This is what we see, a lot of glass. So, you know, in my opinion, is misleading. Plus, the function of the conservatory to me is questionable. You know, why are we trapping or entrapping trees? Why? To benefit who? Science? To benefit the human beings? What about the plants? Are we asking the trees that we entrap in this way what they feel? Of course not. We don't talk with trees any longer. We are advanced human beings. You know, we are not like those primitives who talked with trees. We are not going to talk with trees, and we are not going to ask the tree what it feels. Of course not. So yes, I would say that here in actuality, we have gray over green. That is man over nature. Yes, it looks nice. The plan, it looks nice, you know, the abstraction of the circles and the squares, you know, as long as you don't think that these are glass. And glass in southern Texas means bringing a lot of heat inside these structures. But the sections are nice, and the plan is nice, and the human ego is nourished with what it likes to receive, and you can expiate your guilt in this little temple if that's what it is, you know, drawn and projected in a rather. I mean, is it some kind of a plant here at the top? I think it is, but where are its roots? Anyway. But any greenhouse represents, in my opinion, an assault of man on nature, inasmuch as any zoo represents an assault of man on nature, meaning on animals. You know, you make a zoo, or you make this kind of Arcadian landscape where within the greenhouses you have plants. You actually entrap the plants just as you entrap the Native American Indians in reservation camps in the United States. Yes, it's the same thing. You are imprisoning nature. In essence, that's what you do, and you assert the triumph of the human being. While our triumph is temporary, and the fact that we didn't have winter this year in Romania is a result of that so-called triumph. It amazes me that this man, who found a very interesting formulation, green over gray, doesn't realize that in actuality here we are still talking about gray over green, even if, you know, the glass is not gray per se, but in its ideology, so to speak, in its essence, is gray because it represents the human against nature. Now, this work in Japan, the Prefectural International Hall, I will read about this. The city of Fukuoka in Japan desperately needed a new government office building. Interesting, the word desperately. Yet the only available site was a 2 hectares public park in the center of town. When news emerged that this potential new structure would be located upon the last remaining green area in the city, the citizens of Fukuoka erupted in protest. Ambasz won this commission by successfully achieving a reconciliation between these two opposing desires, maintaining the original size of the park while providing the city of Fukuoka with a powerful symbolic structure at its center. His design utilizes a series of garden terraces, stepping up the facade of the building, thereby giving back to Fukuoka citizens virtually all of the land that the building would subtract from the city. The result was immediate community approval and the complete avoidance of any construction delays due to community challenges. Well, if it was as simple as this text says, it would have been very nice. But in all the pictures that I saw, I didn't see any human being in this so-called park, which actually doesn't grow from the earth, but from the concrete slabs beneath it. So, you know, in actuality, things are not as simple and as beneficial as they seem to be. It is an interesting, somehow, building, but it shows, in my opinion, still man over nature, gray over green, even if in appearance we have green over gray. Because indeed, but you see the gray erupting here. It is erupting. It is as if man in the end has the upper word. And that's the entrance, you know, at a much larger scale, exactly like that door in the entrance of that chapel by Peter Zumthor. This astute triangle which expresses the ego of the human being, which has nothing to do with modesty nor with the sacrality of a chapel. I was referring to the chapel by Peter Zumthor. You know, this triangle expresses willfulness, the willfulness of the architect. And so does this triangle, the triangle of gray. So is the gray defeated by the green? It doesn't seem so. Literally, we see clearly here the gray erupting from being temporarily subdued by the sloping so-called land, which is not land at all. It's an artificially created hill. Yes, in the you know, in the model, in the digital representation, it looks nice somehow. But the truth is, it's rather abrupt, the angle here, and I never saw any human being venturing on this so-called park. So, not to speak about the geometry of the so-called park. I mean, you know, you cannot fool anyone. This is not a park. This is the roof of the building, of a massive building. So, anyway, they built it. And not only you have the grayness of concrete emerging, you also have its majesty glass emerging. And you see it all the time in his architecture. You know, it's like these are the only alternatives. Either we cover a wall or a roof with grass, or we use extensive surfaces of glass, like here. What does this mean? A lot of air conditioning. What does a lot of air conditioning mean? It means not being green, because air conditioning means artificially created energy, it means pollution. So, in its essence, air conditioning is not green, Mr. Ambash. It's not. Otherwise, everything is fine. They built it at the inside. Of course, we have is this Joe Cocker? I guess I don't know, but it's the happy-go-lucky humanity forgetting that in actuality this building replaced this portion of the park, even if it mimics some kind of negotiation. And on the sloping roof, we planted grass and some bushes, maybe even some trees. But look what is underneath, you know. I mean, it's just like Facebook. Facebook is proclaiming the friendship, the universal friendship. Anyone on Facebook has thousands of friends, right? And the numbers increase every day. But in actuality, one has very few friends, if at all. Here, the surface, the green surface, proclaims the triumph of the green over the gray. But the truth of the matter is, it's just a veneer, a skin, very thin, while underneath is the mammoth of human intervention, going deep down in several floors with escalators and everything. So there is a fullness here. It's again Facebook. It's just the face. It's green, but underneath, look here how many floors of grayness. So is this truly in depth, in truth, the victory of the green over the gray? No, no, no. The bulk of the building is still very much gray, is it not? This is just a makeup. If I paint my face in green, it doesn't mean I'm green. The same way, this building is just like the other building around, except that, you know, he climbed with the grass on this sloping facade. That's it. I mean, this is being done today very often, no? With vertical forest and so on. You know, I mean, look. Can you compare this with this? No. This is what truly counts. The huge governmental building, the supremacy of man over nature. Nature is just a veneer, you know, just a fascia, a face. And do you see any human being here? No. Because this is not really Earth. You know, you cannot fool anybody, you know. And maybe it would have been better to be left like without any green, you know, just to tell the truth of what is underneath the grass. And we are going to see a detail of the construction. Underneath the grass is concrete and steel. It's not the earth. Let's not fool ourselves. But the appearance is, conducive to thinking that we re-established Arcadia on Earth. Doesn't matter the eruption of this glass prism and this concrete prism here. Those are some accidents. You know, here it. Look at what is nature here and what is man here. What is meant here is all this thing, 4 levels of parking, right? You know, making this huge hole in the ground for the cars. Then this whole building is for man, for its majesty, man, the human being. And the poor green is, you know, forced to live on concrete slabs, you know, and then here a little tree, and then 3 cars and the other few trees here. All in all, it's still the old story. As the French saying goes, la même Jeannette, autrement coiffée. The same Jeannette, but with a different coiffure. It's still the triumph of man over nature. And it's a triumph which is, in the long run, turning against us. I mean, this is the typical office building, right? That embellish one of its faces with green, it doesn't mean you are in actuality green. No, you are not. It's just an appearance. Yes, like this is nice, but I don't see any human being here. All of these stairs, all these things were, and I searched for other pictures. And indeed, why would the human beings climb on this thing, to fool themselves that they are in nature? Of course they are not in nature. Anyway. Yes, the drawing looks nice, but can you imagine, all the torturing of the poor, bushes and small trees and so on. This, in my opinion, this doesn't truly represent green over gray. No, it's still gray over green, although the appearance might say something else. Now, a cultural and athletic centers, interesting conjunction of two functions, right? Cultural and athletic. This reminds me of a project done by Bernard Tschumi for La Bibliothèque Nationale de France in Paris, where at the top of the building he provided running tracks. So you combine, mens sana in corpore sano. You work on your mind in the library, and then you work on your body on the terrace of the building. Why not? I don't know. Anyway, let me read a little bit about this. This was also built in Japan. A cultural and athletic center erected by a department store chain in the new town of Shinsanda benefits not only its employees, but also the growing local community. The difficult challenge of this project was to accommodate immense massing requirements of the building's 450,000 square feet, about 45,000 square meters, while sympathetically acknowledging the serene open landscape beyond. Ambash was able to return to the new town of Shinsanda virtually all of the greenery that this enormous building footprint would normally have taken away. The Japan Housing Authority was very pleased with the overall benefit that such a design solution would bring to the community, and as an incentive and ultimate reward for this inventive solution, they reduced the cost of the land by almost 2/3. I don't know. I mean, it's still a monument to man, but what can we say? We have here a hill again, and the building is indeed massive. I don't know what cultural activities take place there. It was built by a commercial enterprise. What can we say? The aesthetics are rather postmodern. It's clean, it's nice, and there seems to be something Japanese here. The drawings are nice, but in essence, it's the same kind of design strategy like in the previous building. A lot of glass, isn't it? And glass, paradoxically, is not green. Glass, because of the inevitability of using air conditioning on a massive scale, it's not green. It doesn't matter you climb with the grass on top of your building, you have to consume a lot of energy in order to produce bearable temperatures inside the building. In the winter it's cold and in the summer it's hot. if you don't use air conditioning. None of these windows open. So look at this. In essence, this is not a green building at all. You know, where you use so much glass, you cannot call that architecture green. It's impossible. Even if you use that expensive glass that Mahadev Raman told us about, there is a glass which has also insulating capabilities, but it's very, very expensive, and as such, intrinsically, is not green. To be green, you have to use the smallest amount of resources, the smallest attack on nature, and the fairest architecture. And I don't see this here, I'm sorry. Yes, there is a certain attempt of nature to attack the building, so to speak, but I think it's just a mask. Underneath, there are many other layers of spaces for the human beings, just like in the previous building. So, in my opinion, again, it's la même Jeannette, autrement coiffée, the same Jeannette with a different coiffure. We think we are green because we do this, but in essence, we have this huge constructive effort that celebrates men, men, and men again. Look at this. And all this glass, how could one say that this is green architecture? It's not green. I mean, you know, the enormous amount of air conditioning that is required cannot in any way be called green. These people are blind? I don't understand. This is not a green building. If there was no air conditioning in the summer here, you would die because of the hotness of the air. And in the winter, you would die of cold. This glass is not a green material at all. Look at this. And I think this is the last image of this presentation on Emilio Ambasz. Thank you. And let's wish him happy birthday, even if he was not born today.